and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Vladimir Putin. Joining me now is an executive who was one of the first foreign businessmen to arrive in Russia back in the 1990s. He soon became the largest foreign investor in the Russian Federation, but a decade later found himself thrown out of the country and declared a threat to national security. Since then, he has been a vocal critic of Russian officials and is considered one of the prime enemies of President Putin. The founder and CEO of Hermitage Capital, Mr. William Browder. Mr. Browder, welcome to Ukraine Today.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Browder, can we begin with your fight against corruption in Russia? When you first started uncovering the massive thefts in the government and in the government-controlled companies, and you wanted to reveal these facts to the international community, a lot of your colleagues and a lot of businessmen in the West did not believe you, did not believe to the extent of this gravity of this situation. How difficult it was for you to convince the international business community that this could be happening in such a large country as Russia?
It was extremely difficult because most people, I would say that human nature is generally good, and most people can't imagine that there are people out there who are behaving in a evil way. And so, and the stuff that was going on in these government companies, Gazprom and other companies like that, was really extreme. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of stuff going missing, and nobody, these insiders taking it, and people just couldn't imagine that could happen, and that the government could allow that to happen. It just, in any other country, and when I say any other country, I'm even talking about emerging markets. In emerging markets, even, I remember when I was traveling to places like Thailand and Egypt, and I would tell stories about what was going on in Russia, and even in those countries, they were shocked. Well, the main problem that one has in these types of situations, that I had, and that Ukraine has, is that you have people who are you have Vladimir Putin and Lavrov and all these people who are the legitimate sort of, leaders of a sovereign state, who are blatantly lying, and not just blatantly lying on television, blatantly lying to the face of Barack Obama and Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande. And it's something that's sort of hard to get your head around, which is, how do you deal with somebody who says something which is so diametrically opposed to the truth? And so that's the first problem. The second problem is that even when they get caught lying, they continue to lie. And I should point out that this is not something that's unique to me or to Ukraine. This has been going on for decades. I mean, this was a Soviet tactic. This is what this is what they've been. This is what's in the playbook of sort of KGB Soviet tactics, and that's why they do it, and it kind of works. I mean, a lot of people say, well, John Kerry said, well, I had a meeting with Sergei Lavrov, and he told me that there were no troops in Ukraine. What do you do to that? And it also appeals to their vanity. So he's saying, Kerry would say, well, he would never lie to me.
Mr. Browder, your information campaign against Russia took on a completely different level after the tragic death of Sergei Magnitsky, and that's when a lot of people in the world realized what is truly going on in Russia. But so it took the death of an innocent, ordinary lawyer for the world to get a wake-up call. So, but do you think that right now the international community, the world community, really realizes how big of a threat Russia poses to the peace and security in the world?
Well, I think it kind of goes up and down and up and down. So, at the moment after they shot down MH17, there was no question in everyone's mind that Vladimir Putin was a true menace to international order.
So this was another wake-up call.
That was a wake-up call. However, people have short memories and confused memories. And so after that, then all of a sudden you have all this ISIS terrorism, you have what happened in Paris, you have all sorts of other things going on, and it all gets muddled. And so in the world of, who's our worst enemy? Is it Russia? Is it ISIS? Is it Islamic terrorism more generally? The answer is that Russia has conveniently positioned itself as sort of less of a menace to the world than ISIS. And I would argue that ISIS is beyond awful. However, ISIS doesn't control the largest collection of thermonuclear weapons of any country in the world and ready to use them on a mafia basis if that's what it takes.
Again, following the death of Sergei Magnitsky, you decided to also take on a new level, and on top of the information campaign, you lobbied for the United States to introduce the individual sanctions similar to certain officials, to certain individuals and Russian officials, similarly what the US, the EU, and other countries have done after Russia annexed Crimea. Do you think that this type of punishment is effective?
I know it's effective. And the main reason I know it's effective is I know how upset Putin and the senior people in his regime got when the Magnitsky Act was passed. I mean, they were so apoplectically angry that they basically took it out on their own orphans. They basically said, we're going to ban the American adoption of Russian orphans, who are sick orphans for the most part, in order to protect our corrupt officials. And by doing so, it effectively sentenced orphans to death. And you could see how angry the average Russian person was that the government did that, which was a stupid thing for them to do unless they were so upset. And so Putin was really, really upset by that. And I should point out one other thing, which is that it's not so much the 34 or 32 people on the list that's so devastating. It's the prospect that anybody can be put on that list, which is so devastating for them. And so it creates a huge risk. A risk to their assets, a risk to their travel, but most importantly, a risk to what happens when the Putin regime falls. So why is the Magnitsky Act so terrifying to Russian officials? It's because they all do bad stuff on the assumption that they can make a lot of money, they can be rewarded by the regime, and when the regime finally falls, they can take their money and go live in London or live in Paris or live in New York. But if they're on the Magnitsky list, they're not going to be living anywhere. They're going to be stuck in Russia. And if they come to the United Kingdom and say, we want asylum, the guy at the Home Office is going to type into the computer and say, wait a second, you're a human rights violator. We're not giving you asylum. In fact, we're going to send you back to Russia. And that's the most terrifying thing for a Russian official, to know that there's no place to hide when it's all over.
But again, the sanctions, the economic sanctions which are being introduced in relation to the Russia's annexation of Crimea, the individual sanctions which were introduced by the Magnitsky Act, they are harming the lives of ordinary Russians, certain government officials. But they don't really go and they don't really affect the only person that matters in this crisis, Vladimir Putin.
The only reason why these sanctions haven't been more effective, and they have been effective, but the reason why they haven't been more effective is because the list of sanctioned officials is so short. If they really wanted to be effective, they should sanction the top 100 Russian oligarchs. They don't have to sanction Vladimir Putin because he doesn't hold any money in his own name. He has oligarch trustees that hold his money for him. And all these big oligarchs, the biggest names, the ones, the multi-billionaires, if you froze their money, that would be an absolutely devastating thing for Putin.
So, do you think that the U.S. should go after more government officials, Russian government officials, Russian oligarchs?
I've been very strongly arguing for the U.S. and for EU to really expand the list towards real people. I mean, I've always made the joke at the EU level that they were just going through the phone book and picking out random names to say, look how tough we are in sanctioning people, but winking over to Lavrov and Putin that we're not going to do anyone that really matters. If they really started to sanction people that mattered, that would change the equation.
Again, why is this happening? Because of international diplomacy? Because the EU is so dependent on the Russian gas or Russian economy?
Well, I think that Russian gas is now becoming less and less of an issue because the prices of gas are declining. You know, Gazprom is becoming more of a beggar than a extorter. However, I think the main reason it's happening is because there's a lot of corrupt and conflicted people in Europe. There are people who have been getting money from Russia. There are politicians, there are businessmen in Europe who don't want the gravy train to stop.
In response to your campaign, the Russian officials and in Russia started going from defensive to offensive. And just last month in December, the Russian state-controlled TV channel launched a documentary where they claimed, among other things, the you being the MI5 and MI6 spy, that you are helping and financing the Russian opposition leaders such as Navalny and Kasyanov. So can you tell us the extent of your involvement with the Russian opposition?
Well, I stand on the sideline and cheer when Alexei Navalny exposes another corrupt official. I'm certainly very active in calling for justice for the murder of Boris Nemtsov, but I have no financial or any type of official or unofficial involvement other than morally supporting the Russian opposition.
Do you think that the Russian opposition has any chance in changing something in Russia as long as Vladimir Putin is alive?
Well, I think that Vladimir Putin doesn't know the answer to that question, and I don't know the answer to that question, and the opposition doesn't know the answer to that question. So right now you're in a true and absolute economic crisis in Russia. Oil prices are coming close to $30 a barrel. The ruble is at 76 today. There's a massive economic contraction going on, and Putin has always positioned himself as what I call the good economy, non-crisis president. He was always warning, if you have me, you don't have all this terrible stuff like you had with Yeltsin. Well, now all of a sudden you have this terrible stuff, and he has no idea how to deal with it. And his historic way of dealing with this type of stuff was to throw money at it, but he has no money to throw at it. And so at the same time, he's got these huge liabilities, which are these military adventures that he's going on. He's got sanctions now that have taken away any money flowing into Russia. You have oil prices that are down low. He doesn't know where this is going to lead. And so one of the reasons I believe that I believe that Putin was behind Nemtsov's killing, and one of the reasons I believe that they did that was to basically raise the stakes, to say that anybody who's involved with opposition no longer risks just their going to jail, but they risk their life. And that's because he's so scared of the Russian opposition. And so the fact that he's so scared would suggest that he has something to be scared of, that one day somebody could say something and the whole thing changes, like it did in Ukraine.
Mr. Browder, many thanks for finding the time to come and talk to us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been the founder and CEO of Hermitage Capital, once the largest foreign investor in Russia, and now Putin's #1 enemy, Mr. William Browder. I'm Vladimir Putin. Thank you for watching Ukraine Today.